So,
My camera here.
last week we talked about the law of connection and how important that is to touch a heart before you ask for a hand. It's a big part of our culture. It's a big part of how we lead. And this week is the law of the inner circle, which says a leader's potential is determined by those closest to him. So we've heard this before. You'll become like the 3 to 5 closest people you hang out with. You will eventually morph into those kinds of people. So this inner circle, the law of the inner circle, is a huge part of irrefutable laws of leadership, in that you have to be really intentional about who you spend time with. A lot of the reason why I got into so much trouble as a kid predominantly was because of who I just hung out with. I mean, the people that I spent time with were troublemakers. They got into trouble. And so that's naturally where I was going to go. And, there's a proverb that says, count your footsteps, because, it's trying to make you to be wise about where it is that you're planting your feet. Do you know where you're headed, and are you intentional, or are you just passive or active in the people that you spend most of your time with? Is that on purpose, or is it just by osmosis? This is something that really good leaders do, is they seek out and pursue the right who's that they know are necessary for them to grow in those leadership characteristics. It's not just something that happens by chance. Leaders just don't wake up and all of a sudden they go, oh, this all just kind of happened. I didn't put any effort or purpose into it. The same thing goes with, our kids. We are trying to be very intentional about who they're spending time with, who they're not. You can't control all of it, but you want to be really on purpose to say, is that somebody that you want to be fostering a relationship with or not? Because that's how they'll get formed, right? Your parents are the biggest formative thing. Second thing that will be even just as influential is friendships. At the end of the day, again, either positive or negative, right? It's either a plus or a minus when all is said and done. So John goes on to say, how do I qualify my potential inner circle? And the first one is, do they live out good values? I mean, that's just a question you have to ask yourself. Do they live out good values? That's a good way to test who are those 3 to 5 people that are really close to you. Are those the kind of values that I want to have and live when all is said and done? So what do you guys think about that as a good first starting place? Is, do they have good values? Is this the kind of person? Is this the kind of client? Is this the kind of spouse and relationship that has good values?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
I
there's
think
a lot to be
that's
said. Okay, Tom.
no, go for it, Dan.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because it's like I kind of go back to like growing up, right? My mom used to always say, "Let me see your friends, I'll know who you are." So it was almost like a show me who you spend your time with, then I'll understand more about you along the way. And I always thought that was really unique, and that always stuck with me because it was my family would always intentionally go out of their way to try to have us have events at our house rather than us go to other people's homes because they wanted to see who we were spending our time with, just to kind of get an assessment of, who we were actually outside of the house. So it was actually really interesting.
It's good. It's a great word.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a good like catch all, to keep it's a good main gate, I guess, is the best way to say it. But it's, I like the fact that do they live out good values? You know, I think the live out is probably very important there, because there's some people that you hear, they'll speak and say things that you're like, oh, okay, like that sounds like, that sounds like a good, good way to think, a good way to be. But when their actions like actually, aren't in line with it, um and that being said, I think maybe I just lucked out, because I know in high school I grew up with a bunch of punks that I probably shouldn't have been spending time with
Yeah,
sometimes.
yeah, yeah.
And I avoided getting into the partying, drugs and the drinking and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But I think maybe that's just with a, like you said, it goes back to your parents or your first influence, and maybe it was just good influence through them. But yeah, definitely could have taken a turn for the worst. So yeah.
Yeah, there's always the exception in the rule, right? And so there's never there's always not like 100% on,
Mhm.
these rules, but, parents do have a huge influence, but
Yeah, I don't think I was an exception. I think it was just the fact that parents were definitely very, this is, they were there saying, laying good groundwork, I guess.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's huge. It's a big part of it because you spend a lot of time with them, right? That's
Yeah.
the biggest influence for sure.
Yeah.
The second thing that he says is, do they have a high influence with others? So the second thing that you want to think about as a leader is to say, is the person that I'm going to connect with have a high influence with others as well? Again, that could be positive, could be negative, but is this somebody that you want to connect with that has high influence with other people? And that's a second sort of thing that John says as a leader, as you're trying to grow as a leader, you're asking that question. Do they have a high influence with others? The third thing he says, do they have high giftedness that complements the team? This is another thing that we have to ask ourselves as leaders within the organization to build and say, is this person going to bring something unique, distinct to the team? They are aligned with our values, but there's something specific about them, maybe in their skill set or their background, that really is unique and would add some new flavor and flair to the team that we need to have. That's a question we need to ask, because you don't want everybody has the same giftedness. You want to have a mix of those things. Otherwise, you're topsy-turvy. And you want to make sure that you have the appropriate people on all the different areas to get all the different perspectives and also the skill sets that you need. And so he does talk about having a high giftedness that complements what it is you have. I know that I have certain gifts that I'm really good at. There's a lot of things I don't. And so I try to complement that with those other areas of people. Just to make sure that you're getting the total picture. That's why a board appropriately put together is so effective, because there's all these different perspectives and giftedness. And sometimes I'll be in a board meeting and go, oh my gosh, I never even thought about that. That was such an interesting perspective. And so it helps me get a more well-rounded way of thinking about problems and solutions to those problems. So that's a third thing that's really important in the law of the inner circle. The fourth thing John says is, do they lead well and equip others? Are you putting people around you that are leading well and equipping others? You want to get some people in your life that can model out this idea of leading and equipping, because that's how your growth goes on hyper mode, is when you get into this equipping section of your leadership, where you're now just trying to equip others to be equippers and leaders. And that's what you're looking to do, not just, do all the stuff yourself. You want to make sure people are equipped to also equip others. That's what you're trying to do as a leader, so your growth can really take off exponentially. The fifth one is, are they a good fit for your inner circle? Okay. This comes back a little bit to the values that you have, and also the direction that you're trying to go, your vision. Because you could have somebody that has great skills, but that doesn't necessarily mean they fit your inner circle really well. I mean, they could be exceptional at what they do, but they might not fit the culture. They might not fit the values. So you could have someone, for an example, would be, we could find someone who's an exceptional producer, literally. They're knocking down $1 million to $2 million a year, and we go, holy cow, that would be fantastic for our top line. And we would absolutely say that would be amazing. But that person might come in and be non-team oriented, right? They might just say, I don't I'll come knock it out of the park for you, but I'm not going to participate in this whole culture thing. Seems a little too flowery for me, right? And so that could be a no for us. Probably would be a no for us, right?
Mhm.
As difficult as that is. So, so any comments on that before I move on?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
look at it as
sorry, go
sorry.
ahead.
I look at it as like handing the baton to the next, right? So you're looking at how do we develop someone into equipping them with the resources to be successful, but then also ensuring that we're staying true to our values when we hire people. And that's we're learning that a lot right now, just not only from the loan associate role, but also the loan processor role as well, because we're finding that someone could be great with their words, but then how do their actions align with that? And are we going to be able to get along with them? So it's all part of the vetting process, but also it's been very fruitful that we are staying true to our values in the process. Because I look at Integrity Capital as an inner circle, right? Like we want to be an inner circle that how do we keep that protected and how do we build people up within that? So
100%.
Yeah.
So go ahead, go ahead, Tom.
No, I was just gonna say that I like the fact that it starts with like a catch-all gatekeeper, and then it finishes again with a catch-all gatekeeper. It's a good way to pass people through because you're weeding out the majority of them with that first question, and then that last one again, you're literally going back through all those questions again. If are they a good fit? Because that's really what you're trying to do is determine if are they a good fit. So it's just like I think it's a good method to make sure it's a match.
Yeah, absolutely. There's actually two more.
Oh,
But the sixth one is, can they produce outstanding results? Again, I look at this as there's three things we're constantly looking at with people. Culture, do they align with our culture? Chemistry, will I get along with them? I call it the travel test. Could I go on a trip with this person, right? Not want to jump off the plane. So that's the second thing that we look for. And then the third one is just their competencies. Can they deliver an outstanding result within their specific competency? Because we're not looking for mediocre people, because we're not going to be able to deliver what we're trying to do with mediocre people. Not that they're not valuable. I'm just saying we just can't do that here. Okay. And then the seventh one is, do they show a spirit of servanthood? Does this person show a spirit of servanthood, or is it selfishhood? Do they want to serve other people or not? And that's what we're looking for. Those are the six things. Do they live out good values? Do they have a high influence with others? Do they have a high giftedness that complements the team? Do they lead well and equip others? Are they a good fit for your inner circle? Can they produce outstanding results? And do they have a spirit of servanthood? Those are the six things that you want to look at when you check the box to say, this is somebody we want to attach here so that our team can go rocket fuel, right? As opposed to a descending trend. And there was two little statements here. John says, is when I give my best to my best people, I get the best in return, right? So we want to give our best to our people. Your best effort, your best mentoring, your best investment will be in the best people that you have around you, right? So you got to be selective on who you're doing, and then you invest heavily in them. You don't just sit on the sidelines. You literally get them, and then you invest heavily in them, because you're going to get it. Look, I'm just using this obviously as an analogy. It's people, but ultimately, if you're a good investor, if you're Warren Buffett, right, you're very selective on what you're buying. Okay. It's like, Warren Buffett says, hey, people always want to buy these cheap companies and get them 10 cents in the dollar. And he says it would be similar to me saying, let's go buy a cigarette butt on the side of the road and smoke it. He says it's a old chalky cigarette butt, that doesn't do anything for me. But to get the best in class, you have to be real selective. You might have to pay for that, but the return on the investment is exponential. okay? Because all that effort you're putting in, if you choose the wrong investment, you're getting a mediocre return. If you take the same amount of effort that you put into an excellent investment, it just goes through the roof, right? And that person is that's the distinction as a leader that you need to understand, is that all that effort you're going to put in, because you only have finite time. There's only so many days, hours, years. So it's like, I need to invest in the best because I want to have the biggest influence and impact for the purpose of serving as many people as we can, right? That's the key to the law of the inner circle. So just, again, something to us to constantly be thinking about. It's a huge part of the Whoville here, is that we need to be thinking about who is that inner circle, and are we really committed to that level of excellence on chemistry, culture, and competency. So that's the law of the inner circle.